The others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hey, welcome along on tonight's Mark Steyn Show, live on GB News TV and GB News Radio. Whoever wins the Russia-Ukraine war, are we the big losers? Also, is your idea of a bit of rough Emmanuel Macron? Plus, the greatest poem of the third millennium, no question, and what happens when deathbed demography goes to war. All that and the indispensable part of the show, your questions and comments, do send them over to gbviews@gbnews.uk or via Twitter @gbnews. All that's coming up, but first, the news with Tamsin Roberts.
Mark, thank you. Good evening from the GB newsroom. The President of Ukraine says any compromises with Russia will need to be put to a referendum. Earlier, President Zelensky said Ukraine could never surrender Kyiv, Mariupol or Kharkiv to Moscow. Ukrainian troops have refused to surrender in the port city of Mariupol, which is surrounded by Russian forces. President Zelensky has urged the West to cut Russia off.
Please do not sponsor the war machine of this country, Russia. No euros for the occupiers. Close all your ports to them. Don't supply them with goods. Refuse Russian energy resources. Push Russia to leave Ukraine. And I know that peace is possible, but you must act to reach peace.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson has underlined his horror at President Putin's use of increasingly brutal tactics, including siege warfare and the targeting of civilians. During a meeting with the leaders of the US, France, Germany and Italy, he welcomed the unity of allies, saying collective action has been effective in undermining Putin's war machine. The leaders agreed to increase the pressure on Russia by maintaining wide-ranging sanctions. The Prime Minister has not yet been interviewed as part of an investigation into lockdown-busting parties, Downing Street says. Detectives investigating gatherings held in Downing Street and the Cabinet Office have begun speaking to witnesses. It comes after over 100 people filled out a questionnaire under caution, including Boris Johnson. As yet, no referrals have been made for the issuing of fixed penalty notices. Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe says she should have been freed 6 years ago. Speaking publicly for the first time since being released, the British Iranian questioned why it took 5 secretaries of state for her to be freed. Nazanin landed back in Britain last Thursday after the UK finally agreed to settle a £400 million debt dating back to the 1970s. A court has heard that a man on trial for the murder of MP Sir David Amess had planned potential attacks on other politicians, including Cabinet Minister Michael Gove. The Conservative MP for Southend West was meeting with constituents in a church building in Leigh-on-Sea in Essex last October when he was fatally stabbed. Ali Harbi Ali has appeared at the Old Bailey and denies murder and preparing terrorist acts. The government is facing further calls to begin criminal proceedings against P&O Ferries after the operator fired 800 British workers, replacing staff with cheaper agency workers. The Transport Secretary says the government will consider whether it needs to go further on fire and rehire laws. He said P&O Ferries could face criminal prosecution and unlimited fines over its handling of the redundancies. Protests against the sackings have taken place in London. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Steyn.
Do you follow on Twitter Lijian Zhao? He's a spokesman for the Chinese Foreign Ministry, so he doesn't have quite as many followers as Adele or Meghan Markle, but he is quite the wag. On Thursday, he tweeted the following. Let's take a look at this tweet of his. Yeah, that's a map of the world showing the so-called international community, of which we hear so much: North America, Western Europe, and Australia and New Zealand. As you can see, that definition of international community excludes about 90% of the actual international community, including quite a few big bits such as China and India, and entire continents such as Africa and South America, which is interesting, because many of that apparently unimportant 90% seem to have concluded that whether or not Russia or Ukraine wins the war, the actual losers of it will be those guys on Lijian Zhao's map, the Western world. We were talking last week about proxy wars, which is an old term from colonial days and the Cold War, in which at odd pinpricks on the map, the great powers leave the actual wars to be fought by this or that group of local tribesmen. But I sort of said on Thursday that I thought Ukraine was a very weird proxy war in that the real protagonists, Russia and America, were both de facto Chinese client states, so that whatever happens, Chairman Xi and the Politburo will win. It's the big political question of our time. Basically, is the American moment over? What do you reckon? You can email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews. But joining me now is Dr. Rachel Winston, who's the author of several books on China, including Belts and Roads Under Beijing's Thumb, Economic Domination and Debt Trap Diplomacy. Rachel, it's great to see you. As I said, it was a sort of throwaway line of mine last week, but I was thinking about it, and it seems to me that the important aspect of the war is that it will bind Russia a lot closer to China. And on the other side, the West has become even warier of speaking up or speaking about China. Joe Biden's phone call with Chairman Xi didn't go terribly well. And important countries like South Africa and India have decided that to one degree or another, they've figured this out and they're on Russia's side because Russia is on China's side. What's your take on all this?
Well, Xi said friendship between the two states has no limits. And yet, I think that China is really in a difficult position right now. They have a choice. They can either align with Russia and risk the world's ire, or they can keep its commitment to Russia and cause some challenges worldwide. China's moment's now. China could end the war in Ukraine, though it's unlikely to do so. So the big question is, what will China do? Will it create an axis of autocracy, or will it rise to become a global leader and unifier?
Well, when you say that if it stays close to Russia, it risks the world's ire, I guess the point of that Chinese foreign ministry official was that it's not actually risking the world's ire. It's risking the ire of, America and New Zealand and Belgium. But South Africa and India and Latin America are pretty okay with China's friendship with Russia. So in a certain sense, as China sees it, it's a rising new world order. And this whole sort of NATO plus the British dominions, you know, Australia, New Zealand, this is basically yesterday's team having one last fling.
Okay, I say that a couple of those countries that you've mentioned are just sitting on the sidelines waiting to find out what's going to happen. And second, Africa, you mentioned in your prologue that the world, the international world, only exists with certain countries. But actually, Africa has a lot of stake in what's happening with Russia and China and the United States, where there's lots of investments. Tanzania is likely to be has a lot of oil reserves, is likely to be a beneficiary with the energy crisis. Nigeria also has a big stake in this because they have a lot of oil as well, and they could have a lot more investment. So there are places around the world that may sit on the sidelines, but they are important players in what's happening now.
What do you think China's main interest in this war is? China has basically snaffled up the world without firing a shot, as your book testifies to. The Belt and Road Initiative is a way of actually conquering the world through debt instruments and infrastructure projects, rather than the Putin way of just going in and blowing up a lot of stuff, which I get the feeling the Chinese Politburo would regard as rather old-fashioned. But nevertheless, China is giving off the strong signal that however this war resolves itself, its interest is in not letting Putin appear to have lost the war, and that their assistance is designed effectively to ensure that however it all shakes out, he will not appear to be a big loser.
I think the G7, NATO, EU are all meeting this week. Biden's going to be in Brussels on Thursday and then go on to Poland. I think that there will be a unified message from these Western countries, and they will say to China, you're not going to support Russia in this war. If Russia were to fail in its goals, then the question for many of these countries is, what side are you on, especially for those countries that are sitting in abeyance?
Yeah. Why do you think, though, because it's been presented on Western television as basically the most obvious moral choice you can make. One country's been invaded. The country that's been invaded is the little country, so it's the David up against the Russian Goliath. Everyone loves Zelensky zooming into these parliaments in his tight T-shirts. You'd have to be a fool to take the part of Putin up against Zelensky. Why do you think that's the way it's playing on American TV, British TV, French TV? Why do you think it's proving more difficult for other countries in what one might call semi-Chinese orbit? Why do you think it's proving more difficult a choice for them?
I think this is an economic war as well. I don't think countries realized before this all happened how much of an impact the economics was going to have on all countries. It's going to, well, yeah, I mean, most of this has to do with economics. No country wants to lose their bread and butter. Neither does the European Union. They don't want to offend China in any way. And yet they want to send a strong signal to China as well.
What in that case, let's look at a country that explicitly, in many ways, declares itself as a rival to China, sees itself as a rival to China, and a country that certainly, from London's point of view, is seen to one degree or another in the British orbit. But India, for example, India has been just done a big deal with Russia, a deal that's being done in rubles and rupees without the US dollar. And that that ought to be worrying in Washington, isn't it? Because the Chinese plan, the Chinese basically believe the only thing holding up America is its World War II status as the global reserve currency, Bretton Woods and all that. That basically, if it weren't for that, China could assume global dominance without having fired a shot. So isn't one of the other aspects of this current situation likely to be the weakening of the dollar and the moving of certain parts of the world away from the dollar and to some of these Chinese-led alternatives?
So for India, its contracts were made before Russia entered Ukraine. So so I don't think that India was blindsided. I think China was also blindsided. I do not think that China knew the impact, world impact that entering Ukraine would have, even if they did know that Russia was going to enter. So I think that some of these countries are making decisions because they made these decisions ahead of time. China, you're right. It's very possible that the dollar could decline. There's a cryptocurrency and other currencies that are likely to move forward and take a bigger share of trade and relations. This is happening with China and its Belt and Road Initiative projects. Many of them are using Chinese currency. So there is a likelihood of the dollar declining.
Yeah, and interestingly, all the parts of the world where Belt and Road has been very active, for example, in the Indian Ocean, in Africa, in Latin America, they're all the people who've been most silent on this war. Do you get the sense, you're an American and you're invested in the future of your country? Do you get the sense that the political class in Washington understands the potential gravity of this moment?
I think that there are two sides of America, and politically, they do not agree. They talk about Congress being united, except they seem not to be able to have the President of the United States do much of anything. I believe that there are people that are on the president's in the president's circle who have their own side interests, and that's why the president is not doing a whole lot. Though Congress, I believe, does have an interest in taking more action. So this is a moment, and I don't know if Biden's up for the task, but we can only hope that that more will be done, and that that Biden can step up to the plate and take more initiative.
Well, I'll leave you with that splendid American sporting metaphor about stepping up to the plate, which we don't really have in cricket and rugby, and I hope it works out. I hope it works out for you. Thank you very much, Rachel. Great to see you tonight. What do you reckon to this? gbviews@gbnews.uk is my email. You can tweet me at gbnews. We'll get to your reaction next. Plus, Anne Elizabeth Mute on war and the populists. And as we all know, every Irishman has a touch of the poet, except one. That's all coming up straight ahead.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel. If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Coming up on Dan Wootton Tonight, are we finally about to get answers on the extent of the COVID vaccine's damaging side effects? The man forcing Parliament to confront the pandemic's most taboo subject, Sir Christopher Chope, will be here to discuss his vaccine damage bill. Plus, founder of the Free Speech Union, Toby Young, and GB News star Neil Oliver bring a reasoned approach to the topics leading the news agenda. And I'll break down the headlines of the day with my superstar panel. Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and political commentator Esther Kraku. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
France's President Macron is normally the dinkiest metrosexualist globalist of the G7, but latterly he's gone full Zelensky and is showing up unkempt and unshaven. Oh, look at that, in a hoodie and jeans. His personal stylist has been ordered to affect that rough, tough dumpster chic from the Sleeping in the Park collection by Balmain. And one of the fanciest reception rooms in the Elysee Palace has been accessorized with cheap tables from Poundland to function as a so-called war room. Oh, look, there's Monsieur Macron in his jeans, with his hands on his svelte, bejeaned hips, signalling to the world that he's the Zelensky of the Champs-Élysées. Anne-Elisabeth Moutet joins us now from Paris, and we're always glad to see her. I'm not sure I'm in the mood for Monsieur Macron casually dressed, but is the war working for him as he prepares to face his re-election?
I think you can say yes, the war is working for him because, like in other countries, the feeling is that the vote that you might have cast for domestic reasons is entirely different from the vote you cast when you think here is someone who's got 5 years in the job experience. The others haven't. Now is not the time to change, drivers in the middle of a difficult pass. So he suddenly has jumped in the polls. He's now 31%. For the first round, as you know, in France, we've got 2 rounds. The first one, you've got 12 people jockeying for the second place in order to be, or first place to be in the second round. And they're all behind. It's Marine Le Pen around 16. It's Éric Zemmour at around 12. The Republican candidate at 10. The hard left Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who is the only man standing in the shambles, and there's the French left, at 12%, more than the Républicains, which is a bit of a disaster, and a few others who do not really count.
Well, that's very interesting that Madame Le Pen is at 16 and Monsieur Zemmour is at 12, because that's the reverse of the way it was looking on the French right just a couple of weeks ago, where Zemmour was the new darling of the right, and Marine Le Pen, by contrast, seemed to have over-triangulated herself and wound up a bit too far to the centre of where she needed to be. Is that also, because you know how this is, Anne-Elizabeth, all the populists in Europe are assumed to be great big buddies with Putin, even though I'm sure he's never heard of half of them. But it's a frequent line of attack that the French press use on them. And it seems to have actually had some impact with Eric Zemmour.
It made a lot of impact with Eric Zemmour because although several candidates in France that can be called populist, Mélenchon on the left and Marine Le Pen on the right, he is the only one who actually has never met Putin, but he is on record a few years back for saying things like, Putin is a Russian patriot, France needs a Putin. And then when the campaign came in and the war in Ukraine disturbed everything, his first reaction was to support Putin. His second reaction was to say that no Ukrainian refugees should come to France. And in general, the feeling in France was that he did not know what he was talking about. He had been advised by people who were pro-Putin, who are in his entourage. And essentially, he did not get what was going on in the world, the surge of emotion and anger at the Russian aggression. And it took him several days. And by that time, he was behind all the others. Marine Le Pen knows Putin quite well because he loaned her money. He loaned her 20 million euros 5 years ago when no other French bank would loan her money. But she's doubled, she's hunkered back about things. She's been very reasonable about domestic policy. And she seized the moment in a way where she looks almost mild compared to Eric Zemmour. And so I'm afraid that Putin has killed Eric Zemmour's candidacy.
That's got to be regarded as a totally unnecessary error on Zemmour's part, because it would have been easy to say, wouldn't it? Oh, well, look, I've always said I'm a patriot who believes in the nation state, and I want a nation state with proud, patriotic citizens acting in defense of their nation state. And Ukraine is right now the most splendid example of that in Europe. And compared to the pitiful figure in the Elysee Palace who's just buddying around with his sinister globalist pals, Ukraine is exactly the vision of the Europe I want. Why didn't he get that? Is it just a lack of judgment, or what is it?
I think it's a combination of a bit of lack of judgment and almost no experience in foreign affairs. He's very good on domestic affairs. He was for decades one of the best informed French political journalists, and so he's very good on this. And a campaign that he could be waging on domestic policies would be fine. And he had a very good campaign. He had the most interesting campaign of them all, and a wonderful digital operation. But he himself is not a digital native at all. He didn't used to tweet with his account until his people started doing it for him. He missed out the emotion that really, I mean, you could get in this crisis like possibly in no other crisis of this magnitude on social media, and he just didn't get it. He's got advisors who are dyed-in-the-wool sort of Bannonite type Maurassien, which is the sort of, old-fashioned French right of the beginning of the 20th century. He's out of it, and people perceived it. He didn't get it.
Can he recover?
I would say probably not. He's been slipping in the polls. He's now, with some polls this morning we gave him at 9%. On the one hand, it's almost certain that he's underestimated because the pollsters cannot balance the raw data that they get on him with former contests and the sociology of the vote a previous time, because he's coming here for the first time. So probably he's higher in the polls, but the trend itself is, you can't miss it. And he's been going down steadily. So it might very well be that he's at 12% and he was at 16, 17. But the downwards trend, that tells its own story.
Now let's get to this fellow you mentioned, that I don't get the sense he gets much coverage overseas. And that's Monsieur Mélenchon, who represents the remnants of the French left. And you regard him as a kind of, as a francophone Jeremy Corbyn, basically.
Yes, he's a better speaker than Jeremy Corbyn. He's an unreconstructed Marxist. There isn't a single sort of race identity, type of race identity politics that he has not supported. But he's benefiting from the fact that essentially the rest of the French left has disappeared. The candidate of the Socialist Party, I mean, Socialist Party was the party of François Mitterrand and François Hollande. So that was, as the French say, a government party. She is now at 1.5%. Which is making some people happy because she's horrible. This is where I stop being quite objective. I don't like the way she's sort of held the post of mayor of Paris. But, I'm not the only one to feel that way because 1.5%. So that's a general opinion.
That's true. I didn't expect that. That was said with unusual viciousness from you, I thought.
Yes. I'm a Parisian. I was born in Paris.
Well, I get the feeling, the chips are just falling very well for Macron in this. Yes. He's playing the war quite well. He's basically the only global leader who's still got Putin on speed dial, and he's spoken to him more than anybody else. So essentially, if the war remains to the first round, and if the dynamics of the politics of the war stay the same, he's pretty much a shoo-in for re-election, isn't he?
Yes. To be honest, he by now has completely understood that Putin is not going to give him any answer that he expects to get. He's not going to convince him. And he's sort of got, full in the face, the completely paranoia answer that Putin gives. So to some extent, he's got the measure of Putin, but he has no influence on Putin.
Yeah, but that's working for him, as we've been talking about.
Yes.
Thank you very much for that, Anne Elizabeth. We shall see if Monsieur Zemmour manages to reverse his downturn in his polling numbers. Let's get to your comments. Meanwhile, we were talking about China and Ukraine. And Graham says, cowardly China is going to sit this out for as long as it takes. China cannot be entrusted to help our Ukrainian friends who are being wiped off the planet, quite literally. Graham, China isn't being cowardly. China is assessing its own interests in this. And its interests don't necessarily involve inviting Zelensky to give a talk to whatever passes for the Chinese parliament. China is just playing the long game. And that's working out for China. Julia says it's no different to the West helping Ukraine. We shouldn't be. Why shouldn't China support Russia? Jamie says the sanctions which hurt both Russia and the West will accelerate China's economic premiership. Bingo! Jamie. It's not clear to me. The one bunch of people who are going to be hurt by these sanctions are you. And other citizens of Western nations, because things are going to be getting more expensive. The next group is those countries that depend on imports from Ukraine, such as the Egyptians, who get the wheat for their bread from Ukraine. But basically, whether the sanctions actually do hurt Russia or merely drive Russia into China's arms and to an even tighter embrace and to the development of non-Western institutions and structures for the global economy is the real question. Tom says, reminds me of the story of the Good Samaritan. We like biblical references. We don't have enough appeal to scripture in the godless hellhole of contemporary Britain. So good for you on that. Reminds me of the story of the Good Samaritan. It's all very well to send humanitarian and military aid from a safe distance in Ukraine's hour of need. However, like the priest and the Levite in the parable, is the rest of the world going to continue to look the other way and pass on by? You betcha sweet bippy it is, Tom. Jonathan says, I've been voicing my concern about outsourcing our manufacturing for the past 25 years. It makes no strategic sense to become dependent on other nations. So if a pleb like me, don't sell yourself short, Jonathan. So if a pleb like me could see this disaster coming, why couldn't our leaders and experts? I was in Ukraine until actually just a few hours ago. And I've just got back. One of the things I liked about Ukraine, you know, we have supply chain problems. If you think in the West, whatever you're using, it's all made somewhere else. It's also true in large part for a lot of very basic things like food and medicine, chips for motor cars and things. One of the things I quite enjoyed about being in Ukraine is that everything was pretty much, the supply chain was much more localized. The idea that we could outsource our manufacturing to China and that would free us up to become diversity consultants and transgender pronoun professors was completely idiotic and will probably wind up destroying us. Now, we are introducing a brand new feature here on GB News. It's called the Mark Steyn Show Poem of the Week. And for our first honoree, this is one I mentioned last week, a St. Patrick's Day poem about Ukraine by the eminent rocker and Knight Commander of the Queen's Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, Bono, as read to her fellow members of the US Congress by Speaker of the House and clearly a lover of poetry, Nancy Pelosi.
Oh, St. Patrick, he drove out the snakes with his prayers. But that's not all it takes. For the smoke symbolizes an evil that arises and hides in your heart as it breaks. And the evil risen from friends, from the darkness that lives in some men. But in sorrow and fear, that's when saints can appear. To drive out those old snakes once again. And they struggle for us to be free from the psycho in this human family. Ireland's sorrow and pain is now the Ukraine, and St. Patrick's name is now Zelensky.
Don't blame Mrs. Pelosi. It rhymes fitfully and scans barely at all. Anne McElhenney, filmmaker and best-selling author, joins us now. Anne, every son of Erin, their heart must be bursting with pride at this all-time greatest Irish poem.
Listen, Mark, you know, we need to encourage more poetry writing, not less. And I know you feel strongly about this. You have your poem of the week. But as my mother would say, and people in Ireland would say, God between us and all harm. You know, Ireland's sorrow and pain is now in Ukraine, and St. Patrick's name is now Zelensky. Do you know, it's not exactly W.B. Yeats now, Mark. Do you know what I mean? It's not exactly things fall apart, the centre cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. It's not that, right? But one thing that I think is really interesting to point out, and I saw your video of that, but I would ask your audience, you should check that video out on C-SPAN. They had a slightly different camera angle. And I thought it was very interesting. There were a number of gentlemen that you could see at the front of the frame who never stopped eating. Now, that could easily be, by the way, to honour the famine. And as a kind of an honour to the famine that they never stopped eating. But God between us and all harm now, Mark, that's not poetry.
No, it's not. What I found interesting is that he refers to it. You slightly misquoted it. He said, Ireland's pain is now the Ukraine. You're not meant to say the Ukraine. It's now one of those giveaways that you're some closet Putinist and you're not recognizing the national sovereignty of Ukraine because you're going back to calling them what they used to be called when they were under the Russian jackboot. So you can't ever even get that bit right. And even the rhyme of the terrible rhyme of family with Zelensky isn't quite right. And let me just say the big thing. He's done it in the form of a limerick. I can't think of any poet, whether you're talking about Lord Tennyson or Rupert Brooke, who has ever tried to do a war poem in the form of a limerick, which comes from an Irish town limerick and is regarded entirely as a comical form.
Yes, and then to have this delivered by Nancy Pelosi, who's trying to rearrange, and you can see it on the camera there after she finishes, by the way. And as you probably know, when that tape continues on, she then introduces Riverdance very quickly after mentioning the word Zelensky, with a couple of nice Irish dancers come on. But honestly, you know, she does that. First of all, the minute she finishes, she does the rearranging of the teeth thing. And I don't know what is going on with the teeth, but she's doing that whole rearranging of her dentures or whatever. But also, I think we all would have noticed there that it seems like, you know, I suppose it was St. Patrick's Day. And I think maybe she wasn't off the drink for Lent. Do you know that kind of way? Because she certainly sounded, she was challenged, by the way, reading this piece by Bono, who I think what happened here, Mark, I think what happened here was that he was asked to do this maybe, you know, a few months ago. And, you know, and he's a busy fella, him being a rock star and everything, right?
Yeah.
And then somebody phoned him up at the last minute and said to him, "Oh, God bless us, did you send us the poem at all?" And he went, "Oh, God, I remember the poem." And he wrote it then in that 5 or 6 minutes then, because it has the feel of that now. It has the feel it was a bit of a rush job there. And I found the rhyming couplets were kind of extraordinary. As you say, it was a bunch of limericks stuck together.
Yeah, yeah. And that first line, "Oh, St. Patrick," he chased out the O is like a dead giveaway that you're just in the pub making up some sea shanty on the fly, basically. I thought. Anyway, you were right to point out that it was followed by Riverdance, and well, it was followed by Riverdance, and I'm sure we all regret that Nancy Pelosi did not join in the step dancing, because we would all have liked to have seen that. Thank you. Thank you very much, Anne. Great to have you join us. If you would like to write a Bono-type limerick on Ukraine, give it a go. You can give me your best, gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can Twitter me, GBNews. Take it in any direction you want, although we do insist you begin like Bono, with a big, bold, declarative O. Oh, there once was a rocker called Bono whose rhymes were a bit off and on-o. And there'll be bonus prizes if you manage to scan as atrociously as Bono and misaccent his subject's name. Oh, a rocker tried rhyming Zelensky. At Davos, I once saw Sean Penn ski. Ah, screw it, I'm Bono. I raised awareness about Omicrono. So who cares if it's deficient in rhyme and scansion and other such flotsam and jet ski? We will be back with lots more for you, including demography. That's coming straight up on the Mark Steyn Show. Keep those poems coming in.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Let's get to a few more of your comments. Moment in history, I think. That's how some of us see it. Basically, at the end of the Second World War, Great Britain transferred its dominance to the United States. At that point, the United States had a great advantage that all of its rivals' cities had been bombed to smithereens, and America was totally unbombed. In fact, I'm not even sure they have the word smithereens in American English. It was so unbombed. And that 1950 moment was great for the United States, and we all tugged and towed along with it. And that 1950 moment, those 7 decades of American dominance are being dismantled before our eyes. Dan says China is the only real global superpower, investing in Africa and the Caribbean without any opposition. The West, including the United States and the dysfunctional EU, has been asleep at the wheel. Too late now. They're not really, quote unquote, investing. They're building infrastructure projects premised on debt arrangements. And those debt arrangements essentially bind those countries to China. For example, Sri Lanka defaulted on the debt on this new port it built, and as a result, the Chinese wound up with a 99-year lease on that port. So it's like a bit like a mini Sri Lankan Hong Kong, as far as they're concerned. It's not, they don't have sovereignty in perpetuity. They got it for the next century, and who knows what's coming after that. And the point about that is that this is advancing their interests around the world, and they wouldn't have been able to afford to do it. The only reason the Chinese can build a port in Sri Lanka or an airport in Uganda or invest $1 billion in Antigua is because the United States of America, and curse you, you Chamber of Commerce, idiotic so-called fiscal conservative class, the Chamber of Commerce right in America transferred the entirety of American manufacturing to the Chinese People's Republic and helped China come up with the only economically viable form of communism. It was the worst strategic miscalculation of the last half century. Let's see about what else we got here. Will the United Kingdom, says Alan, pander to China the same way it does to the United States when China becomes the next dominant superpower? Okay, I'll pick this one apart. China is the dominant superpower. China gets its way. For example, I've had a lot of tweets tweeted in my general tweety direction demanding to know what I think about the WHO, the World Health Organization, that has so bedeviled us these last 2 years in COVID-stan, saying that it now wants effectively to replace national health services when there is a global pandemic. So in other words, the health ministry of France, the health ministry of Germany, the health ministry of Ireland would be subordinate to the World Health Organization in the effect of a global pandemic. That's basically because the World Health Organization is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Chinese government. Okay, I mentioned a few weeks ago that Eastern Europe in general is mired in deathbed demography, and Ukraine in particular has one of the lowest fertility rates on the planet. On the other hand, Russia has a shrinking population, so all this sentimentalist claptrap about what a sterling job these Ruskies did in the Second World War is irrelevant, because that Russia is dead. It's face down in the vodka. It's now a geezer nation that no longer has hordes of surplus Russian youth to throw into the fight, which is why Putin is actively recruiting in Syria and from the ranks of ISIS. Paul Morland is a demographer who has a brand new book on tomorrow's demography coming out in the next few days, and I look forward to reading that book, because I've got a sort of amateur interest in demography, which is kinky and unusual, but is very relevant to where the world is headed. Paul It's a strange war that's going on in Europe at the moment, because it's a war that's being fought between two powers, two nations that both are in serious demographic decline.
This is really unusual, and when we look at it, we think it seems strange because it's in Europe, and there's been a lot of criticism on the left about people saying, oh, we don't expect to see blonde-haired, blue-eyed people at war. But I think a lot of what's strange about it is that we associate wars with very young countries. Europe was quite bellicose when it had young populations. It has been pretty peaceful. Even places like the Balkans have aged a lot over the last 20 or 30 years, and the peaceful line has just about been held. And what is so unusual here is that you do have two relatively elderly populations at war. My sense is that the result is it can't possibly have the oxygen of somewhere like Syria or Yemen and go on and on for years and years. One way or another, this is going to end a lot earlier than places like Libya.
Yeah, you mentioned Syria and Yemen and Libya. The one I always think about is Afghanistan, which has one of the highest fertility rates on the planet. And so on the one side, you've got mums and dads who have 7 or 8 children. And on the other, you've got Westerners who have one designer yuppie kid at the age of 39. And it's a lot more difficult to throw your youth into war when essentially just one death eliminates your entire posterity in that way. And I wonder if the Afghan example on it.
I think you've put your finger on it. It's not that there's an absolute lack of young men in Russia or Ukraine. They're both quite big populations, and they, although relative to the size of their population and relative to the past, there aren't that many young men. There are quite a lot of young men, but if every one of those young men, or almost all of them, are single children, or one of 2 boys, or a boy and a girl, if those 5, 6, 7, 8 families are not the norm, then it's really difficult for people to sustain those kinds of losses. And when the body bags come home, if they come home, there will be a terrible price to pay for the politicians, which is why I think Russia appears to be, I mean, there's a lot of rumors circulating, but Russia appears to be making every effort to avoid body bags appearing and funerals being held in major population centers.
Yes, I find that very interesting. I take it he's made a calculation that he can't take the heat if there is too much sacrifice of young Russian men. What's interesting, of course, is that I crossed this border just over the weekend, is that the Ukraine borders Hungary, and as you go into Hungary from Ukraine, there's a big sign saying, "Welcome to family-friendly Hungary." And they're the one country that has made as their public policy priority the idea of increasing the size of families. Do you know why more, I mean, Putin has tried to do it but failed. Do you know why more countries don't do that?
Well, it's very interesting that the two people who've really tried very hard are Putin and Orban, who are gentlemen who have a certain amount in common and might be seen as somewhat authoritarian, although Putin clearly more than Orban. I think it's very difficult for liberal democracies to start telling people what they see as their desired fertility rate. I think it's a very sensitive topic in liberal countries. I think somewhere like Britain, it would go down pretty badly. And the other thing which is interesting in Hungary is they've tried very hard to get their fertility rate up. They've put a lot of money into it. It's not clear it's really worked. The fertility rate has bounced a little bit, as it has in Russia. But the interesting thing in Hungary is they're really giving incentive to people having 3rd children. That's where the money's going. And yet it's actually picked up a bit by people having 1st children and 2nd children. So it's a bit of a technical point, but the evidence is that governments can be very effective pushing in the direction of history and getting fertility rates down by having programs of family planning and education. And they're moving in the direction of history as populations get richer and more urban. But what's really difficult, and no one's really cracked it yet, is to get the fertility rate up. And it's all very well to say, well, under Putin, it went up from 1.3 to 1.5 and briefly 1.7. Now it's down to 1.5 again. None of this is getting anywhere near replacement level.
No, which replacement level is generally regarded as 2.1. So even if you get it up from 1.3 children per couple or to 1.5 or 1.7, you're still in decline. And that's what makes this war so unusual. You know, when I was in Ukraine last week, almost everyone I met had one child. And there were a lot of people who had no children. That's a complete transformation in the way we look at things over the last couple of generations, isn't it?
And I think it undoubtedly has been linked to the fact that Europe has been a more peaceful place. So I think there is a very clear statistical link between family sizes and the likelihood of war breaking out. Now, social science is not mathematics, and this is an exception. Whether it's an exception that proves the rule, we have to wait and see. That rule will be proved if, as I feel, it's very likely that the oxygen simply goes out of this conflict. Now, that doesn't mean it's not horrendous, that a lot of lives aren't going to be lost and cities destroyed, but I just can't see populations like this keeping it going year in, year out, as we've seen in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, and in parts of Africa as well.
No, that's very interesting, Paul. Your new book is called Tomorrow's People. And in the crudest sense, it's not clear to me that either Ukrainians or Russians will be part of tomorrow's people. But you have a very interesting...
One thing I say in the book is that we've had groups in the past that we see as partly mythical or historical who've simply ceased to exist. There are no Goths or Visigoths anymore. Now, partly that's to do with changes in identity and assimilation and evolution of culture. But there is no reason to think there need be Japanese and Italian or Ukrainians and Russians if generation after generation people are not prepared to have a couple of children. Now, one of the problems in Russia...
We're going to have to leave it there, Paul, but we're going to bring you back because this is one of the most important topics of our time. That's going to do it. Dan Wootton's next. Stay safe, stay free.
Hello and welcome to the latest. I'm Aidan McGivern. Variable amounts of cloud will drift across the UK during the next 24 hours, giving the odd shower, but for most it's staying dry and fine. We're on the edge of an area of high pressure which is dominating things to the east of the UK, keeping weather systems at bay from the Atlantic. A southerly airflow will mean that areas of generally medium or high cloud will drift north from the continent, and they could bring the odd shower to southern England, South Wales during Monday night and into the start of Tuesday. But for the vast majority, it's simply a dry night, clear spells, and where we get prolonged clear spells in sheltered spots, there'll be a touch of frost as we start off Tuesday. The lowest temperature, perhaps the northwest of Scotland, -3 Celsius possible here. However, despite the cold start in places, it's looking like a sunny morning on Tuesday, and any medium cloud that drifts north, bringing with it some showers, will tend to fade away by the afternoon. Just the odd shower there for southern Scotland and northern England. Otherwise, under the sunshine, 15 to 18 Celsius widely up and down the country, 19 or 20 degrees possible in London or Cambridge. Cloud cover generally fizzles out on Tuesday night into the start of Wednesday, and with widespread clear skies, Wednesday morning starts off again with a chill in the air, a touch of frost in places away from urban centres, but a bright start. There'll be the odd fog patch for parts of eastern Scotland into northeast England, but for the vast majority, Wednesday morning is simply looking sunny, and that's how it stays throughout the day. A shower or two could bubble up across East Anglia and the southeast, as temperatures rise to 17 or 18 Celsius. But for the vast majority, Wednesday's looking sunny, so is Thursday, so is Friday, but with a bit more cloud in the far northwest.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. No spin, no bias, and no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton, and breaking tonight, as Western leaders, including Boris Johnson, reaffirm their commitment to helping Ukrainian refugees on a joint phone call today. Why are the Ramona establishment spewing faux outrage over the PM's comments, leaking the crisis to Brexit? I'm going to expose the hypocrisy of Alistair Campbell and his ilk in my digest next, before I get the views of my superstar panel tonight, the Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the